Not only has the Flores defense regained its stripes, but I think I've figured out exactly how Brian Flores pulled it off. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day, each and every day. I appreciate my hashtag everydayers so very much. You all make this thing go round and help me out so much, especially in season. We are here, and thank you so much for hanging out. Hello, if you are new as well, and you're just excited about the Vikings, looking for new podcasts, and you found this one, you came to the right place. You can find Locked On Vikings Monday through Friday, wherever you find your favorite shows. Just search out Locked On Vikings. That includes the SiriusXM app, where you can find not only all Locked On shows, but you can find live broadcasts of games. Just search out Vikings on the SiriusXM app, and you can find like the live hometown broadcasts. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. It's Twitter Tuesday today. That means I'm answering your questions as submitted to me via the Google form, which you can find in the show notes to any podcast episode, as well as by email at lockedonvikingspodcast@gmail.com. I also put out a call on Tuesdays or on Mondays to try to get some questions. I have way too many. I'm not going to get to all the questions. Usually I can. Mailbag is way too big today. So I'll save some of the ones that I think are interesting that I want to maybe circle back to, but a lot of these just like are, by the next time we have a mailbag, we're going to have a whole different group of conversations. So if I didn't get to your questions, I am very sorry. But the first one I am going to get to comes from Vike for Life, who asks, I'm wondering how Dallas Turner is doing. I've heard Jetta say he'll be ready for next Sunday, but I haven't heard anything about Turner. So quick injury updates. Kevin O'Connell went on the podium and gave us some updates. Both Dallas Turner and Justin Jefferson are described as day-to-day, and he seemed non-committal, but optimistic about their chances to play against the Texans. So my guess is that we see like limited or DNPs from, I'm going to say like limited for Justin Jefferson. He had what feels like a Charlie horse. He's a contusion. He's got a bruise on his thigh. They said, we'll treat that. He'll be fine. He might not even be on the injury report by week's end. Dallas Turner might be like a DNP or a limited all week and then be like questionable for game day. And we'll have to kind of monitor that situation as it goes. But it's definitely day to day, not week to week, is good news. So pretty positive news on both of those fronts from that game. That's the latest that we have on Dallas Turner, but still very much, look, if Justin Jefferson's a DNP on Wednesday, maybe this is more serious than they let on. But as it seems right now, the way that the Vikings have been talking about it, and Kevin O'Connell specifically, they seem relatively unconcerned. Skeptical Skull asks, are the Vikings secondary players good, or is Brian Flores just papering them over again? And that sort of feeds into the next question that I'll take too, which comes from Informe Purpura, who asks, what are the main differences you observe between Flores' defense this year versus last year? So this is, I guess, the main thing. A lot of people had questions that were kind of like this, that were like, is this real? Is Flores just scheming it up? Is it the scheme? Is it the players? Is he going to go get a new head coaching job? All of these Flores questions. And I've got a few more here too. But here is the main difference philosophically that I think you can credit for the defense's success. It's simpler. It's simpler, and in that way, it's more flexible. And it's asking a little bit more of its players, especially up front. Ron Johnson has actually made this point a lot over the whole offseason, and on like Minnesota Football Party with me, but also on like all his K-Fan stuff and Ron Johnson show and all that, is that a lot of it is just about fit and about guys like Grenard and Van Ginkel and Dallas Turner just being faster than the edge rushers that Kwesi and Flores kind of inherited, like Danielle Hunter, who's a phenomenal player, but you're not exactly asking that guy to get into coverage. There's Adarius Smith, who not, the quick, agile, we want this guy looping kind of player. You want those guys hand in the dirt going up against the tackles all day long. Made a lot more sense for a Fangio-style defense where those guys are going to be in fairly static positions. But it's different. And the idea of kind of spreading the wealth of saying, hey, Danielle Hunter is no longer the focal point 1A kind of guy for this defense, but instead it is going to be Grenard sometimes. It's going to be Van Ginkel sometimes. It's going to be Harrison Phillips sometimes. It's going to be, whoever, right? It's been Jahad Ward. That essentially allows you to design pass rushes that create more points of failure. In last year's pass rushes, a lot of them were designed to just get Danielle Hunter one-on-one or make him chip. And so you would chip Danielle Hunter, and everybody else is eating double teams and doing kind of sacrificial, unselfish stuff. And if Danielle Hunter didn't get home, then you basically wouldn't get pressure. And as good as Danielle Hunter is as a player, even the best pressure generators only get pressure, 20% of the time would be ungodly numbers, right? It's only a fifth of the time. So if you don't have anything else, right? So the idea of spreading the wealth has worked way better than I thought it would. And what it means is that who gets the one-on-one can be a decision that you weaponize. Because the thing about it is if you go up against a team that's got Danielle Hunter and nobody else, which is basically what the Vikings were last year, especially with Marcus Davenport out, then you can essentially just force the issue to be double team on Danielle Hunter, dare anyone else to beat you, and it doesn't matter what pass rush you design. You're either relying on like Jonathan Bullard to win a pass rush, or you're sending some ridiculous blitz that is guaranteed to get an unblocked rusher, but because you can't trust that guy to win a one-on-one, you need that guy to be specifically unblocked. That's not very flexible. That can be, if they pick that up, you're just screwed, right? And you probably have to send more players to do it. So Flores' blitzing has been a little more sensible in terms of frequency, but crucially, it's been a little bit less all in. It's been, we're going to send 5, we're going to shoot one linebacker, and it's been simple. You're doing some stunts sometimes, but you're not necessarily having to concoct the mad scientist like insanity to get Josh Metellus unblocked up the A gap. Just send Blake Cashman, and that's going to mean that Jerry Tillery and Jonathan Grenard and Andrew Van Ginkel, all 3 of them have one-on-ones, and you hope somebody wins. And you've been generating a lot of wins just off of those guys. So having a little bit more variety in the players you can trust has allowed them to be a little bit more simple and to commit less hard to the blitz, leaving coverages on the back end a little bit, those coverage assignments are a little bit easier. And the holes in those zones, while they still exist, any 6-man zone is going to have holes in it, they're a little bit harder to take full advantage of, but you still see some of it, right? You still see, Deebo Samuel on a dig route 20 yards down the field. So they're still getting some of it, but it's managed to sort of back off a little bit and then still generate pressure, even though you're not committing as hard. Those are the main differences. So are the secondary players good? Look, in those zone coverages, guys like Stephon Gilmore, Shaq Griffin have been playing well. Really happy with how they've been playing. Metellus has made his presence known as well. And I should also give flowers to like Pace and Cashman, although I think they've done more in the run, and I'm more impressed with that. If I want to talk about those guys, I'd rather talk about the run. But like on the outside, when it has been man coverage, those corners have held up the way that they have to. But you can see the seeds of it being beatable if you catch him in man coverage. I do think it will still be an opportunity, and I probably wouldn't just go switch to being like a cover one team. Not many teams in the league can do that. MN Sports Appreciator asks, am I biased, or is Ivan Pace just an insane maneuverer around these O-linemen? He's so slithery. Hey, yeah, man, that's his game. That's how it goes. Yeah, linebackers, I think, come in 2 main categories. You've got evaders and you got bruisers. Bruisers are your Jordan Hickses, your Anthony Barrs. I am going to hit you. I'm going to, take on a guard one-on-one and hold my spot, get to the gap I'm supposed to get to, and play this physical game kind of straight up mano-a-mano. And then you've got Ivan Paces, and I think Cashman is this a little bit. He's kind of balanced, but I think he's more of an evader than a bruiser. And like Osmoa, he's an evader. Where when a guard comes at you and he climbs to you in the run game, you're going to duck under him. Ivan Pace is not going to take on a 330-pound guard head up and win that battle. He has to be kind of ghosty like this. So yeah, that's his game, and there's a lot of linebackers like that. They're becoming more common in the league these days. Stezo asks, as an undrafted free agent, Ivan Pace is eligible for an extension after 2 seasons. What do you need to see from him in order for him to be extended after the season? So as an undrafted free agent, and I know Stezo knows all this stuff, there are a lot of options. There's, exclusive tenders and like a second round tender on him, and you're probably not going to get anybody. I don't know if you can get away with the original round tender, or you can and then just like resolve to match whatever contract comes in. But you can use those tools for a guy like that. There's also exclusive rights free agency for undrafted free agents that might end up being what occurs there. Because if you've accrued like less than 3 seasons, you can get that. So there are a lot of tools at your disposal to have team control of Ivan Pace. There's not really a reason to extend him after his second year. That would probably be a waste of the opportunity to get Ivan Pace for that many more cheap years, and then you give him the big money when he's in a contract year and he's about to hit free agency. That's typically how these things play out. I have a very thick mailbag left to work through, so we are going to keep it rolling here on Locked On Vikings. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn understands that whether you run hiring for a bigger firm or own your own small business, that whatever your team needs is unique to you. Every business is a snowflake with its own culture, its own priorities and principles, and its own kind of talent that it is looking for. So whatever it is that you need, LinkedIn understands that it's got to be a little custom. And that's why it has all kinds of tools that can help you write the right job descriptions and narrow down gigantic pools of applicants to get somebody that is right for you. 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours on LinkedIn. And it's not just a job board. LinkedIn is huge. It's LinkedIn. Everybody has a LinkedIn, whether they're looking for a new job or not. 70% of LinkedIn users don't even bother to visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Today's episode is also brought to you by Gametime. Gametime is the best place to find last-minute tickets to any event, whether you're trying to get to an upcoming Vikings game, maybe this Sunday's against the Texans, or maybe one further down the road, or whether you're just trying to sneak to a Twins game as the regular season at least comes to an end, and you're trying to get spontaneous tickets to that or to whatever else is going on in your town. You can find it all at Gametime, comedy, concerts, theater, whatever it is. You can get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, so you can make sure you're satisfied with your view. And if you toggle on all-in pricing, it shows the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. They also have Gametime coverage. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. When you are done with Locked On Vikings, I want you to go check out Locked On NFL, especially on Wednesday mornings, where you can find me taking on Tyler Rowland and trying to chill him out with his radical takes. That guy's insane, and they wanted me there specifically to rein him in. So you can see that struggle for power on Locked On NFL. You can see it twice a day, Locked On NFL, now an AM show and a PM show in the mornings with Tyler and in the evenings at the barbershop with Tony Wiggins if you're into something a little more chill. Let's move on with this Twitter Tuesday episode of Locked On Vikings. The next one comes from Anonymity Rando, who asks, how have our season expectations changed after these first 2 games? So a lot of people asked a question, something to this effect about some people were like, what's it like to have been wrong? Which I point you to yesterday's episode. I talked about how my expectations were very low for the Vikings, and that I think if you look at these 2 games and you don't change them, you're probably not really being honest with yourself. And that's really that kind of answers your question, right? How have the expectations changed? If you want a number on it, the Vikings were a 7.5 win total team at FanDuel before the season, and now they're at 9.5. So just by virtue of starting 2-0 and taking a good win from the 49ers, Vegas now thinks, and FanDuel now thinks, that they are like a full on, I mean, that's a 10-7 team if you hit the over, right? Like that's full on. You guys are like maybe a playoff team. You're actually a thing in the NFC instead of a team we forget about by Thanksgiving. So that's probably how the expectations have changed. How yours have changed might not be the same as how mine have changed, where at the very least, I mean, look, it's a long season. There are 15 games to go. And if the Vikings lose the next two, they lose to the Texans, they lose to the Packers, we're not going to be talking Super Bowl anymore, right? Like we're going to be right back in the pits going, what's our draft pick going to be? But which might not even be fair for a 2-2 team. That's a perfectly reasonable start. But again, for me, I've always been, hey, I'm a see it to believe it guy. And the fact that I refused to believe it before I saw it is not something that I feel bad about at all. But if you do see it and still decide not to believe it, then I think you're being dishonest. I can't do that. Which is why I said, hey, I'm here now. Like you beat the 49ers. It was real. It wasn't fluky. They really played well enough to deserve a win against the 49ers. That proves a lot that had previously only been theory. Seeing it tangible does a lot for me, and I think it should do a lot for me. Red Zone Points Enjoyer asks, given that the Vikings were a bottom 5 red zone offense last year, it was really cool to see wrinkles on both Naylor TDs in the red zone. With a commitment to the run game and schematic investment in the area in the offseason, would it be crazy to think that this could be a top 5 unit this year? Man, red zone is tough. Red zone is like deeply random. Statistically, it's one of the least like stable things out there. But I do think it's also one of the there are skills to it. So I think the reason that statistically it doesn't match is because coverage rules change a lot in a red zone. And so it's sort of playing a different game in the pass. Because things compress, right? You don't have 30, 40, 50 yards down the field. Safeties play it different. Coverage rules are different in terms of like your heels have to be on the goal line. And some teams are better at that have really good corners, but maybe aren't good at that specific thing. So like red zone doesn't typically is very famous for not matching like general quality. If you have a really good defense, you could have a really bad red zone defense, or vice versa, the bend don't break defenses and stuff, right? And it's also just super unstable for a lot of those reasons. So it's really hard to predict that. I'm probably not going to go there. So would it be crazy to think that it could be a top 5 unit? I don't think anything would be crazy. I think kind of all outcomes are still likely. That's probably not a satisfying answer, but that's the one I got. Nate Walton asks, I remember when Ed Donatel arrived, he spent a whole bunch of episodes trying to explain 4-3 versus 3-4. Yeah, I spent a long time learning the Fangio scheme for that. Then I remember after Flores arrived, you tried to explain that the concepts are way more complex than the number of linemen and linebackers. Yeah, very true. My question is, are using the terms 3-4 and 4-3 definitions of defenses going to become obsolete in the future? Forget the future. They're obsolete now. My whole point was like, the fact that they're quote unquote a 3-4, basically anytime they're in nickel, they are going to use a 4-3 front. So I think play to play, you can still say, 4 down front, 3 down front, 5 down front, those kinds of things can still be useful nomenclature. But in terms of this is a 4-3 defense or a 3-4 defense, I think kind of only belongs in Madden nowadays. And I think it's been that way for a while. Luke Fraud VFL asks, on the Sam Darnold, it's not even a volunteers thing, but you had to make me read it. On the Sam Darnold sack where he ran into Ingram, is there some sort of play breakdown guide for him to stay in the pocket rather than run? No, there's not a rigid rule set, if that's your question. So the question, as I understand it, is like what determines whether you bail on the pocket or whether you try to rescue the pocket and stuff. And for me, this is a very subjective matter. So I'll tell you what I think, but you're going to find lots of people who think other ways. But for me, I think the platonic ideal is to save the pocket. I like people who rescue the pocket, right? If pressure is coming and you can do like the Madden pocket presence drill where they shoot the beanbags at you, one little step, and then you can basically call that pocket clean again. That's the best way to do it, right? I think of Joe Burrow as the king of this. I think Tom Brady, that was something that he did very, very, very well for somebody who is sort of known as a statue, but he did a great job of just one little movement and the angles work out again. And then if you can't do that and you just have to break the pocket and bail, then go ahead. Some players go on an internal clock. This is Kirk Cousins. He would talk about this too. I'm not speculating. Like he would say this. he wouldn't pay attention to the front after the snap. He would get his information for the front, the blitz look and all that pre-snap and do what he needed to do there. But once the ball was snapped, he wasn't dropping his eyes and looking at the line. He had to be reading the coverage. And so he would basically like 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, and if 3 Mississippi comes, he's going. So if pressure got there before 3 Mississippi, you would get him totally blindsided on a sack. You get a bunch of strip sacks that way. And if no pressure came, but his clock went off, he would bail on a perfectly clean pocket. So all that stuff would happen, but it allowed him to be a little bit more cognizant of what was going on in the coverage. And that was a trade-off that he basically chose and was worth and said, thought was worth it. So that's one rule set, but otherwise I think for Darnold, I don't think Darnold does that. I think Darnold just feels it. He's vibes. Like he just decides on his how he's going to rescue the pocket or not with just like vibes. And in terms of like what lane you go out or whatever, it's whatever's there. Once you're out of the pocket, it's do what you got to do, man. The coaching points are very like, hey, be conservative, don't do the Caleb Williams, throw it across your body for a hideous interception thing. But we saw a couple of those in the Sunday night game. But, find the play if you can find it, and there's no shame in throwing it away, even on third down. James Kunow asks, second week in a row where Jalen Naylor scores on a play where he bluffs like he's blocking, then scores a touchdown. I got a couple about this. Do you think there's a way for KOC to subvert this, or are these two plays too dissimilar to speculate on how he could subvert this concept? Well, that is the subversion. When you're bluffing like those blocks, so the touchdown that you're talking about in this game, in the San Francisco game, it looked like duo. Just looked like a duo run. Jalen Naylor motioned in to be a sniffer. That's the name for a player, a blocker that's like standing kind of just behind a couple of like tackles or tight ends. So he motioned in to be a sniffer, and when you do that, very common to run out of that. So you act like you're running, and the corners will then try to get past you, and then you blast out and you're wide open. So if teams are going to start playing your run blocks conservatively, if you're going to be able to motion Jalen Naylor in as a sniffer and a corner is going to think twice about attacking you in the run, then just run it, baby. The subversion is duo. You just do your staples. I've got a lot more offensive questions, as well as some stuff about the Texans and the future of the Vikings season. So we'll get into all of that next on Locked On Vikings. Today's Locked On Vikings episode is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook, and they've got all kinds of really cool stuff coming in. You are running out of time to take advantage of their YouTube TV free trial deal. Through September 22nd, that's the day after the Texans game, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. So if you have a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime, so don't worry about it. So if you wanted to lay down a couple bucks on the Vikings being home underdogs for the second week in a row, 2.5-point dogs as I'm looking at it on FanDuel right now, if you wanted to lay down $5 on that, or maybe just an emotional hedge, go lay down $5 on the Texans money line. You won't make a lot of money, but if the Vikings lose, you'll at least have a little bit of an extra buck to soothe the pain, okay? I respect that move. Whatever it is, lay that down, and you can get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Just visit FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook. Moving on with this Twitter Tuesday episode of the Locked On Vikings podcast, Rob Bach asks, do you think we'll see more of Ty Chandler? I've learned my lesson from the Cook versus Madison situation that I shouldn't compare Jones's play against a fresh defense against Chandler's play against a gas defense. That is a very underrated part of this. And yeah, we talked about that a lot with the Madison and Dalvin Cook stuff. But yeah, that is a very big part of it, is like when you're the freshest legs out there, yeah, you're going to look a little better than you would if you got, 25 carries a game. He continues, but I feel like Chandler has earned an extra drive or two per game. I think this decision is probably going to get made for them. We're already seeing Aaron Jones a little banged up. He's got to leave the game for a little bit, so he got a little bit more there. But I feel like I got to do a Patreon on Aaron Jones eventually. Let me tell you, what Aaron Jones is doing right now is actually papering over a lot of blocking mistakes. And it's not an alarming amount of blocking mistakes. Every team, even the good run games, have a mistake here or there, and then somebody else papers it over. But Aaron Jones is doing a lot of legwork right now. I think as much as you can have him on the field, you want him on the field. Ty Chandler looks bursty, and I love that. But like you said, a lot of that has to do with the defense being gassed and him being fresh legs. That's what he's here for, is to be fresh legs. That's the point. That's the strategy. But as much as I can have Aaron Jones out there, I want Aaron Jones out there. Hammond Egger asks, after fumbling in week 1 and having the public calling for his head, who was calling for his head? CJ Ham came up with a crucial punt block in week 2. Who among those who had gas this week are the most likely to have a redemption game against Houston? Probably Aaron Jones, right? With that fumble and the way that Houston, the way that Houston played the Bears. This is going to be a scouting thing that I'm just like taking directly from the QB School Patreon page. By the way, JT O'Sullivan, shout out. I was watching the Sunday Night Football recap and how a lot of their fronts were very soft in the middle. And I don't mean soft to insult the players. I mean like literal like linebackers playing pretty far off the ball, open B-gap bubbles and stuff. And they really rely on their edges. It's Will Anderson, that's Danielle Hunter. But on the inside, they don't play it quite as strong. So running straight up the middle feels like a really good option. Just go super north-south and say, Brandel, Darisaw, Bradbury, Ingram, these guys are all just going to be strong and we're going to push on people. That would sort of imply an Aaron Jones thing. And these duo runs have been great the first 2 weeks. So I love sticking with that as an idea. So yeah, I'll probably go with him. Alex Conant asks, last year the Vikings were consistently struggling with the play clock and it was a bit of an issue in week 1. What did they fix so it wasn't an issue in week 2? Okay, so the operation, like in and out of the huddle, yeah, big issue. And it's kind of funny, if I recall, Kirk Cousins had a couple of those week 1 in Atlanta. So maybe there was some kind of wire crossed there, and maybe a similar wires crossed over there in Atlanta. I didn't catch the Monday night game. I know they won, but I don't know if all that stuff got better or not. But I think it's just a get good situation. Like they did the thing better. Essentially, I did a whole spiel on it last week. I think it was during Twitter Tuesday. You can go listen to it. But essentially, the West Coast offense has a lot of words in it, a lot of stuff to relay. And a lot of times there's motions, checks, reading the offense, changing the play or not, audibles. Like you need there's a lot of stuff to do and you need all those 40 seconds. And you just needed to kind of tighten up the operation. O'Connell actually talked about it a little bit on the podium and said that, sometimes that's just Darnold needs to make a decision faster. Sometimes I need to get the play in faster. And it seemed like whatever that was, they ironed it out and they had a more efficient operation. So they just need to do all the same things, but just do the stuff faster. No more complicated than that. Jeff McNamee says, since PFF grades normalize over a season, is there any reason they don't just show how much a player's grade goes up or down in a given week? It would level off over time and give you a much better comparison among players. So PFF themselves and how they market their grades, I think outside of like the Sunday Night Football broadcast, which, I mean, it's next to, total yards and TD interception ratios. Like, we don't need these to be stable stats. They're very much simple for like mass consumption. But the way that like PFF media operates, usually they don't rely too much on the grades. They'll work them in where they can as a marketing tool, but they usually don't push the grades more than they would push, the advanced stats that they have access to, or, grades plus math, longitudinal stuff. So I don't think that it's much of an issue. I think it's more of an issue when you get somebody that just like looks up the grades, posts a tweet, and then everybody just like turns that into their opinion. I think that's the part that we have to like cut off. That's the real issue there, and we have to. It's a personal issue of discipline that we all kind of have to take upon ourselves to fix. Natalie says, seeing a lot of national media betting on the 49ers, and I didn't see them walking too much back after their loss. Been wondering your thoughts on the whole big market, small market teams issue. Okay, so yeah, I think most football fans think that there's a bias against their team. Like, ask the Patriots. Like, that's a giant market, and they're, been the golden boys of the league for 2 decades. And people will still be like, gosh, the announcers just hate the Patriots. Like, no, they don't. They listen to them talk about Tom Brady, but you'll hear it. So some of that is just, I don't know, part of like a universal football viewing experience is feeling like the world is against you. But the big market, small market thing, I think, is a very old issue, like back in the 80s issue. Because and nowadays, in terms of what you will see discussed in national forums, this is betting stuff, this is fantasy stuff. Like, you hear about the Packers, they're the smallest market in the league, but you hear about them plenty. If you want to say that maybe there's a bias because the 49ers are a favorite team in the NFC and the Vikings are not, I do think that the way that broadcasts prepare is susceptible to those biases, and maybe it should be because you expect a particularly good game from the 49ers, and so if you prepare graphics packages and stuff to sort of lean toward likely outcomes, then you're going to have a more dynamic broadcast and you're going to be able to make more stuff ahead of time. That's probably a reasonable time to guess, but then you get situations like Sunday Night Football, Caleb Williams putting down a total clunker, and it being very clear that NBC had prepared for him to play well, and you didn't really have the tools to like comment on poor play with pre-made graphics packages and stuff. So Chris Collinsworth has to say all these crazy mental gymnastics thing. Like, you could tell that he had prepared for a good Caleb Williams game and almost was trying to will it to happen because that's like where the like a lot of work had gone into. I don't know. Edge asks, why does Andrew Van Ginkel have so much aura? If you're asking me to describe aura, man, you don't get it. Shy Guy asks, you mentioned that the Falcons broke Kirk by making him go to even footwork, which is typically used for option or athletic quarterbacks. However, if I watch older footage of Peyton Manning and Dante Culpepper, their feet were even in shotgun despite not running any option. And in Manning's case, not being necessarily known for athleticism. I'm wondering if I'm just misunderstanding what even footwork is. Okay, so yeah, the points that I had made about even footwork, by the way, if you're just a Locked On Vikings listener, you have no idea what that's about. I had a couple of comments last week about Kirk Cousins' footwork. I actually wrote a whole article about it at Wide Left, as well as Caleb Williams' debut and Sam Darnold's debut as a Viking. So go check that out. But yes, the points that I was making are very much modern ideas. Back in 2005, even footwork offenses were just different structurally. So even footwork had totally different reasons for you to run it. And a lot of it was, and Kirk actually answered this question on the podium, which very funny that he had to. Sorry, buddy, didn't mean to cause this. But about like opening up to both sides of a run and being able to do that like swiftly enough. That's part of the point. But really the point is whatever you're comfortable with. That was really my point with Kirk, is whatever you're comfortable with. And I guess I was right, because I hear, and I saw a couple of highlights verifying that Kirk Cousins put his left foot back on Monday Night Football and he's back to his old ways. And I think that that's what's right for him. I got a bunch of questions about the future, stuff about the Texans, stuff about, how many games are they going to win by Halloween, stuff like that. Let's table all that, right? 2.5 point home dogs versus the Texans. We'll start there. We'll get to all that when we get to Crossover Thursday and the predictions on Friday and stuff. But we got a lot of time to think about the future. Let's live in the now. Tomorrow I'll do a little bit of film breakdown on some more of that Brian Flores stuff. And then, we'll get into Texans mode here soon. I'll see you all tomorrow. And as always, Skol.